Welcome to another episode of Don't Panic Geocacher, a series devoted to helping you solve mystery and puzzle geocaches. My name is Arjen and I go by Waterfan5 on the geocaching.com website. And this episode is called Intentionally Left Blank and is about puzzles where there is not a lot of information to be found and you kind of have to find out where the puzzle is because the cache owner has left the page mostly blank. So let's take a look at that. So here's a screenshot of one of my own caches, and you've probably seen caches like this if you look at mystery caches, where there's just not a lot of information to go on. Now, where can you find the puzzle? Where can the puzzle be hidden? That is what this video is all about, and I'm going to give you some tips and tricks of where to look for the puzzle, and maybe how puzzles can be cleverly disguised, and how to unravel the mystery of where the puzzle cache is, and then of course potentially solve it. So I'm going to use some of my own caches as always to explain how they're solved and where the information is that you need to solve the puzzle. So this is a little checklist of things that you should do when you look at a mostly blank cache page and you don't see a lot of information to go on. First thing, you have to make sure that are we really dealing with a mystery cache that can be solved from home, right? So it could be that we're looking at a field puzzle, a challenge cache, or a bonus cache, or maybe the cache is at the posted coordinates and maybe it's a gadget cache that you just need something special to open. So to do this, and explain this in one of my introduction videos, uh, looking at the attributes may help, right? Does it say that this is a field puzzle? Does it say this is a challenge cache? Does it say it's a bonus cache in the attributes? So first, always check the attributes to see if there is something there that might indicate this is not a puzzle at all. You don't have to look for a puzzle, this is solved in some other way. Second, you may also look for tags that say, is this at the posted coordinates? Because it might be a gadget cache if it is at the posted coordinates, or maybe it's a certain type of challenge, and especially in older caches, there could be something called additional log requirements. Not really valid anymore, but if it's an older puzzle, that may certainly be the case. But a good hint that we're dealing with a puzzle that can be solved from home is if there is a geochecker. If there is a geochecker, there is a good chance that there is something to be solved from home, especially if it says to don't go to the posted coordinates. That combination is we're dealing with a puzzle. So once we have established that, there's a list of items to check. And I will in a second demonstrate this as well with an actual cache page. But of course, you read the description, and if the description doesn't say anything that looks like a puzzle, like the screenshot that I showed before, there is a variety of ways of where to look for and see if you see anything special. And I will give some examples, and I will use quite a few of these later on in this video to solve puzzles. So for example, the title. The title itself is long enough that it could hide a puzzle. Many caches just use the title and that's the entire puzzle. The date could be something special. So look if the date is maybe off from the publishing date or that it was published on a special date, because it might be a hint of solving the puzzle, or in certain cases it could be the entire puzzle. So I'm using here two specific ones. March 14, which is like 314, which is like the first digits of pi, or May the 4th, which basically if you pronounce it says May the 4th. And so that sounds like a Star Wars type quote, right? Maybe coincidence, but it may help you with the puzzle. So really what you want to do is look at the cache page and do you see something unusual. Another good thing to look for is a bookmark list. Did the owner, or somebody that knows the owner, put it on the bookmark list? Because that could be suspicious. People that solve it or want to find it may put it on the bookmark list. But when in the moment of publishing, or in reality shortly after publishing, it appears on a suspicious bookmark list, then that is something to look into. Also, additional waypoints can hide a lot of information, and I will give some examples. Is there any pictures attached that maybe look like not very suspicious, either on the cache page itself, or in the background, or just attached in the gallery? All of those is worth checking out. Do the coordinates mean something very special? Do they indicate a certain location? where something could be relevant that's neat. Not that the cache could be there, but there could be something else there, even if it's not a field puzzle. And I'll give some examples as well. In certain cases, the GC code lends themselves very well for a puzzle. I've seen people that got kind of like a unique GC code and kind of formed a puzzle around the GC code. Especially when you get in harder puzzles, it's often the numbers of a GC code might help you encode or decode something. And then the cache owner name. The cache owner name is easily changed on the cache page with adoption and other ways. So the cache owner name can very easily be modified to actually represent coordinates. So something to look at as well. And then for older caches, there is something called related web link, a URL to another page. Of course, the page itself can have URLs, and it will show that. But the related web link was kind of like a hidden feature on the page where there might be a link somewhere else. Mobile apps often won't show it, but on the geocaching.com website you can see it. And so what we'll do in this video is we'll go through a variety of these techniques and many others of how information can be hidden using these standard features on the cache page. Okay, let's take a look at an example. So this is a cache page that is adopted by my girlfriend Zena, and she gave me permission to use this for this video. So let's take a look at the different elements of the cache page that could be used, right? So first of all, the title, Montreal Hideaway. It's pretty innocent, doesn't look like anything specific. And if you look up the location, you will actually see that the area that it's there is called Montreal Park. And so this is most likely a reference to the area. The date, nothing specific. It's an old one, but it doesn't look like any unique date. And if you would look at the published date, you'll find that it is hidden and published around the same date. So most likely not part of the puzzle. Other information to look at is, for example, the GC code, as we see here. Again, 4-digit GC code, but nothing that looks like it's immediately a puzzle or indicate that we could use it for a puzzle right here. We also have like kind of always the difficulty, 1.5. So we're probably looking for something pretty straightforward. So that may give us a hint. Let's look further down. As I mentioned, not a lot of here related to a puzzle, but there is a checker. So we are pretty sure here that we're dealing with a puzzle right here. But nothing that says here what we should do. A couple more places to check. So if we go here, for example, we see the trackables. Well, this one has been around for a while, so it has been dipped a lot. So this especially makes a trackable puzzle quite difficult because if the cache stays around longer, there will be more and more trackables, and you may have to dig through a lot of pages to see, is there a trackable by the cache owner here? Or is there another suspicious trackable here? Maybe a trackable that has the same name as the cache is a good hint that that's the trackable we're looking for. Sometimes it may not even be on the cache page, and you would have to go to the owner page itself to find a trackable with the same name. All of that could be used to hide information. I will show you some more of that later on. We also have here a bookmark list. Now, if we check the bookmark list, we see that it is on 3 bookmarks. One that looks for a name challenge, pretty innocent. One that looks part of a very big list with lonely caches, again, very innocent. And then another one about 2003 caches that are still active, also not too special. So most likely the bookmarks are also not there. So we've checked a variety of things. We can look at the cache owner name, as you see right here. This can be adjusted by the cache owner, so it can easily hide a puzzle right there. So always worth checking to see if there's anything special there that gives you a hint of what you need to do. But in this case, for this one, there's actually 2 ways of solving it. The first one is pretty straightforward. If we go to the waypoints, although the final coordinate is hidden, it tells us here what to do. Subtract 1 from north. So if we do that and we go to the coordinates and we subtract 1 from north, like this, and we do check solution, we get a nice green checker and we know that we have solved the puzzle. Note that there's one more useful, and I will show that in a second in another cache page, which is called the related cache page, an old-timey feature that is no longer possible for new caches, but for old caches there might be information there, or it might actually be the puzzle that might be hidden right there. And so we'll take a look for that when we go to the look at some other page. So here is another one. This is one of my own, an archived cache. This was part of a series where some of them had to do with almost blank pages. In this case, there's actually is a puzzle right here. It is a little picture here that you need to solve, but it utilizes the feature here at the top, which says related cache page. Most mobile apps don't support this, so you would have to go to the website to see that there is a related cache page. And in this case, if I click on it, I go to a website named Zombo.com, very entertaining and hypnotizing, kind of like Hypnotoad. Um, but this is actually a hint for the puzzle because the logo of Zombo.com is used in the puzzle as well. So in this case, it wasn't the puzzle itself, but it was something that you may need to solve the puzzle that is right here. So yeah, take a look at that as well, but you need to go to the website. As I would recommend for most puzzles, really, it's much easier to solve on a computer. Mobile, you miss quite a bit and you may not be able to solve it. So I think most of the people that solve a lot of puzzles do so on a computer and not on a phone or anything. So yeah, these are some of the items to look for on the blank cache page. And what we'll do is we'll go into more detail of some of those, as well as show you some more techniques of where information can be hidden. So I showed you some places of where puzzles could be hidden, but the puzzles may actually be hidden inside the description as well. And a common technique is the so-called white text. Given that the geocaching.com web pages have a white background, it is easy to make the text invisible by making the text white. That means it doesn't show up on the default browser. Now, some phone apps will actually bypass this, and so for example, if you use CGeo, it will actually show white text on the cache page as regular text and immediately reveal information. But some other apps won't do that, and certainly in the browser, when you use the standard background colors, you won't see it. But there is several ways to reveal the text, for example by selecting the text, and I will demonstrate it in a second. We can see the information there. Another option is by looking at the so-called HTML code of the page, and we'll do that later on in the video as well, and we can see that there is white text available and we can search for it. So let me show you that with an example. So we're going back to the Montreal Hideaway. And in Montreal Hideaway, we already, of course, solved it. But there's actually a second technique to solve it. And that is done through the so-called white text. So you see there is nothing here, but there is a little bit of space right here. Now, of course, that space can be hidden. But if I select this space, using for a Control A on the keyboard, on the Windows keyboards, or by dragging my mouse, I can suddenly see that this text would become available by selecting it, and we see the same subtract 1 from north message. In mobile apps, the official geocaching apps, you can switch to the text view, and that will make this available, making it also solvable on mobiles. And other ones that don't use a white background, like as I already mentioned, some of the apps, then they will also make it immediately available. But it's often good to do when you don't see anything is either pressing Ctrl A and selecting all the text, or by dragging all the text and making sure that there is nothing hidden with a white text on a white background, making it invisible. I mentioned in the beginning that the coordinates, waypoints, but also the posted coordinates can be very important. They may give you a hint as what may need to be done. There might be specific information in it. But especially if I don't see a puzzle, there's a few things that I will try almost immediately if there is a checker. And that is it simply hidden at the posted coordinates? There's many caches that are so-called liar caches, or caches where simply it doesn't say that it's not at the posted coordinates. And it's always good to first try, is it at the posted coordinates? So you take the posted coordinates, put it in the checker, and is it there? There might also be some kind of hint about like switching or reversing or some other manipulation that you may have to do with the posted coordinates. So you see here that the north and the south can be switched. And so is that something that's going on? Or do we need to reverse it? often there might be some kind of hint, like maybe a reference to a mirror, or maybe a reference to the positions that are being switched, or something that is listed in reverse, that you need to do something with the posted coordinates and put them in reverse. So this is quite often that you just want to try, and even if I didn't see it right away, but I didn't see anything else, I may just simply try it. The checker is often free, so I just try a couple of guesses and making sure that it isn't something obvious that I overlook. Another thing might be that it works in combination with the title or something else on the page. Um, so we talked about earlier the Montreal cache. Um, and so one way to describe that is Star Trek, Neil Oliver, right? So Star Trek, to boldly go, and then Neil Armstrong, go one step for mankind. And then Oliver North, for example. So to boldly go one step beyond north means we have to go a little bit from the posted coordinates in a certain direction. So the title here looks perfectly innocent, but may actually be everything you need to solve the puzzle. Now, your puzzle outcome may also be some kind of weird offset like this. So where you see a lot of pluses and minuses, you may see that quite a bit in more complicated puzzles where there is multiple steps. And so in this case, it could be that, for example, with this posted coordinates, it is 10 digits right here that it says 0, so it means a 1, 2 minus 1 is a 1, 3 plus 1, or sorry, 3 minus 2 is a 1, and so on, to basically do calculations with these numbers with the posted coordinates. So don't underestimate the posted coordinates, that they may be involved in some kind of puzzle if there is very little information there. For example, the GC code could be working in combination with the posted coordinates. Maybe something else that there is on the cache page you need to use in combination with the posted coordinates. So don't ignore the posted coordinates if you have some kind of numbers that maybe it manipulates the posted coordinates, because it's very little information has to be given to give kind of like an offset type puzzle. So this technique I explained in my introduction video about mystery caches, and it is involving the source code, or the so-called HTML code of the web page. Every web page is made out of HTML code, and the geocaching.com website allows you to put extra text in there, so-called comments, hidden information that is not visible. There's also a variety of other ways where the HTML code can give you information that is not easily visible. For example, alternative text to images is not always shown in a browser, so it's harder to see. Some browsers don't show it. There could be extra text in so-called URL links, links to other web pages, or links to images. All that can be utilized, and it is certainly on a mobile app, it is hard to see that information, and you may have to go to the source code of the page. Now, as I mentioned, with mystery caches, I certainly recommend, just like these videos, to watch them on a computer. But some mobile apps will support it as well. So, but I will display it on a computer how to look at the HTML code and what to look for, how to find the relevant context. There's really only two areas that you need to check. That is, one, it is the location of the background image, which is the background URL, which simply can be found by searching for background. The other one, and that is the more common one, is the user supplied content or long description. I often search by long description. There's technically also a short description, but they're right next to each other under the section called user supplied content. And if you look for that in the source code, and I will show that how to do that with a Chrome browser, you can find more information about a cache page that is very hard to find otherwise without going to the source code. So here is another puzzle cache of mine. So Waterfan 5, not a field puzzle. And to make it quite obvious what we're doing, it is called source code, right? So it's an indication that we have to look for the source code. And indeed, if we look at the cache page or highlight the cache page, there's nothing much here of a puzzle. There's an explanation to what source code is from Wikipedia. There's a link here. There is a reference to the movie source code, and it says it's also a good place to hide coordinates for a mystery cache. And in that case, this is what has been done for this puzzle. So in Chrome, I can right click and say view page code. In other browsers, it works slightly different. But all of them is that you want to do is do something that will bring you to the HTML code of the page. Now I mentioned there's two areas to search for. One is the so-called background. Now you maybe noticed this page had a background, but if I go for the background, I can see that there is a background image right here that is being used, but the image is configurable and can easily be adjusted with some sneaky information. It is possible to put extra information in here. Geocaching.com website won't filter that out, and so it could be a puzzle hidden here in the background. So the other one that you will always find is background color. That is just a standard text, nothing special. Now if we look slightly further and go through the other option that is there, that is the so-called user supplied content, and you see that right here. And if I go there, then in the Chrome browser, immediately something shows up. Now I said the other thing to look for is long description, which is accompanied with a short description. All of this between these areas, so between this and user supplied content, is basically where we have to check. Anything after that is not relevant. So we're looking here for the span that goes with the long description and the div that goes with the long description. Everything in between is relevant. Now, in a Chrome browser, it will nicely highlight comments, but as lines don't necessarily do a break to the next line, we kind of may have to scroll to the right as well to make sure that there isn't anything that we can't directly see. But here we see the so-called HTML comments. They're not on the cache page. If I go to the cache page, there's no hidden text here at the top that I can select. This is truly only way to see this is inside the HTML code. And here it will tell me that, well, we're looking in the right area, but not in the right place. Maybe look at the links. And so this is the other locations that I mentioned, the alt text for images. So there was an image on the page from the movie source code. And if I go there, there's actually alternative text. Some browsers will immediately show it, other browsers will not. So you see mine, it doesn't immediately show when I hover above it. There's ways to make it visible. But easy way to see is that for this image, the alt text is there. And this could very well have been a puzzle, right? This text was made by me. I could have put anything there, including the coordinates, a link to something else, whatever I felt the puzzle is. It can be quite long as well. But in this case, it also says, this isn't here, look at the link. And so if we go to that one link, remember on the cache page, there was a link to Wikipedia, but if I clicked on it, it just said page source code, nothing else. Well, that doesn't mean that there is nothing there. So you kind of have to space all this and make sure you go to the end of the sentences as well. Because here we see a link to the Wikipedia, but actually there is another link here placed on the cache page as well. That is actually a non-clickable link, so we can't see it again. But here it has a very suspicious ID that kind of looks like a coordinate, right? If we look at the coordinate range here, it starts with 3347 and it has 084. So here we found directly a coordinate. This can of course be much more complicated and much more hidden. This could be some encrypted text, it could be a Caesar cipher or anything that you wanted, but it just shows how information can be hidden on the cache page. So plain comment, frequently used, some alternative text for images, also used a lot, and finally links or any other areas can contain additional information, and also there you can hide info. So source code is a great way for a puzzle to be hidden, and you see that quite a bit. But I recommend always looking at the source code, even if you see a puzzle, because there might still be hints there or part of a puzzle. Many puzzles you might get halfway, and then the rest is hidden somewhere else, and you may have to look at the cache page to find the other half of the puzzle, or a piece of the puzzle, And so looking at the source code never hurts if you're stuck, because there might be something there. This is not only true for the source code, there's another piece of area that always encourage you to always further research, and that is the title of the cache page. Now, I've mentioned this in several other videos of how the title can be used. And so the title can be, I think, roughly 38 characters long, but it's enough to make a puzzle. So you always have to look at the title as, is this helping me solve the puzzle? And I will give you some examples here, but always look at the title. If you don't see the puzzle, is the title the puzzle, or is the title a hint to the puzzle? I'll give you some examples. So let's say that the cache is called Hide Treasures Search. Looks somewhat odd because it doesn't look grammatically correct. And this is actually a perfectly valid location in what 3 words. I don't think there is a cache hidden right now, but it looks like a very eligible location. So if somebody's in the area, you can make a puzzle called Hide Treasure Search, and you will have a very difficult puzzle to solve, right? If you don't know what 3 words is, look at my video, Don't Panic, about coordinate systems. It will explain what 3 words is, of how a coordinate can be disguised as what 3 words. Here's another one, Great Stash. Well, in the old days, with geocaching, before it was called geocaching, they would refer to stashes instead of caches. So Great Stash sounds like a perfectly innocent name. But in my other videos, I also talked about base 26 conversions, how you can convert from letters to numbers. And if you convert the word great and stash to a coordinate, you would actually get a perfectly valid coordinate. The word great is about, what is it, 300,000? What is it? Yeah, so, or 3 million actually. And then stash starts in the 8 million range, which is exactly the range here that we need to look for. So the words just seem very innocent, but actually there is a way to convert them to a perfectly valid coordinate. Again, it would be difficult without any hints, but it doesn't mean it is not a puzzle. More obvious would be if the title has some kind of weird code. And now it really becomes a little bit of, do you recognize the code? Of course, it could be like a cipher, right? Vigenère cipher, some other cipher that indicates what's going on. So, but also it could be a link somewhere that could be an indicator to a specific puzzle. For example, if the title is this piece of code, BOS W6 Jack HGGW, that is actually the code of uniquely links to a YouTube video. And of course, in a YouTube video, we can hide many puzzles. Same with other websites, Twitter, trackable websites, Jiggity, the puzzle website. It could easily be a description to a puzzle. And all you need to say is the puzzle name on Jiggity and the unique puzzle number. And that's it, right? You don't have to tell them it's there. Maybe put a little puzzle icon in front of it as a hint. But that's it. Only the title will now be the puzzle. Similar, for example, it could be a code like this. So some of the geocaching websites have very clear numbers, right? Trackables, TB, often used for certain trackables, but they have a certain format. Same with geocaching codes, bookmark lists, BM. So it's kind of important to recognize those codes of some of the popular websites, or do searches, right? Try to figure out this code that I see. Yeah, it could be a cipher, but could it be a link to something else where the puzzle actually is? So in this case, this number is actually a trackable card. And if you go to the trackable card, you will be able to log it. There's no puzzle there. But it could very well be a puzzle, right? Trackable pages can be manipulated. The last one, see if there's any numbers in the title. Any numbers, of course, are ideal for coordinates. So if the numbers say, oh, it's on the roots of 3 number whatever, right? 2 numbers here, these are giving perfectly decent coordinates. If you take the square roots of these, you will get a perfect coordinate that is long enough to give you in the right area. So title is always worth further researching to see, is the title the puzzle, or does the title give me a good hint of where to find the puzzle? So let's talk about bookmark lists. Bookmark lists are, of course, the list of caches that you can create as a premium member. and those are ideal to uh, use for puzzles. Why? Because you can add extra information to them. You can extra information to the bookmark list itself in the description, but actually to each cache you can also add additional information, like instructions for a puzzle. And the order of the caches can be arranged, meaning that by alphabetically and numbering them, you can kind of say which cache goes first, which cache goes next. So for coordinates, that's ideal because it can be the first number. So what you want to look for is bookmark lists that are by the CO or by somebody that's maybe closely related to the CO, and that, for example, have 14 caches on there, so one cache for each number. And also scan, of course, every description to see if there's any hint of a puzzle. There might simply be information in there what to do with each cache. The caches on the list, the titles could be important, the dates could be important, but especially if it seems to have the right number of caches, that is a good hint. But even if the number is off, it doesn't hurt scanning the bookmark list because there might be information hidden on that bookmark list, as I mentioned in the description or somewhere else. Now, one of the things to be aware of, an unpublished cache cannot be added to a bookmark. So that means that technically when the cache gets published, that cache couldn't be on the bookmark. But it doesn't prevent the CO from making another bookmark list that this cache is not on, that they simply have in their profile, right? So you can go to the profile, go to their public bookmark lists, and see if there is a public bookmark list. It's also, of course, a hint if the cache wasn't on a bookmark and suddenly the CO adds it to a bookmark. Might be a good hint that that is the place to look for. So those are just some things with bookmarks, and let's take a look at a puzzle that uses bookmarks as one of the puzzle tools. So here is one of my caches that uses a bookmark as one of the solves. So when we go down, you may recognize the screenshot from earlier in the presentation. So there is nothing here, just a note to self, put puzzle here, which of course the puzzle isn't here. Now, there's actually two ways of solving it, and I will discuss both ways in this video. But the key thing to observe here is it's a bookmark list here called puzzle caches, which by itself wouldn't be super strange, right? Because this is a puzzle cache, it's by me, but it is worth investigating when we open up the bookmark list. And as I mentioned, the puzzle caches are more, so it's actually some more on it. There's 95 on here on it, and so there's a description you can see here, and of course the description could be the puzzle. Now there's 95. That doesn't lend itself well that each cache is part of the puzzle, but if it, for example, was 14 or 15 or something like that, then you may want to look at each cache and see if you can see something that makes coordinates. So in this case, we just have to scroll down, and we see like 95 of them, so it's actually a pretty big list because I actually put also non-puzzles on there. But if we scroll through this, you may recognize some of these that I portrayed in my videos. Eventually, we'll get to a description of a cache that has a little bit of an extra note on it. So we see nothing yet, but here under So Long Rome and thanks for all the smileys, we actually see a weird code underneath, because in a bookmark list you can put a note with each cache. So yeah, it's almost all the way till the end, so you have to have some persistence, so that's why precision is needed. But yeah, one of them has an extra note. This is the GC code of the puzzle. You can still see that here at the top. And these are the solved coordinates that you're looking for. So you can see, very tricky, very sneaky. It's hidden, but therefore it's worth to look at the bookmark lists because it's pretty easy to add additional information to it. I also mentioned that trackables can be a way to hide information. So what you're looking for is some kind of correlation between the trackable and the cache page. So it could be, for example, that the cache page is named after one of the trackables made by the owner. So you may have to go to the cache owner's page, see if there is a trackable that have a corresponding name or a similar name. Or it could be that the owner dipped, uh, so basically placed the trackable in the cache or had the trackable visit the cache. So what you would need to do in that case is look at the trackable history and look around the publish date, right? Because if it was there during publishing, it needs to be there before the cache was published, maybe a few days or even as much as a month before. Realistically, it could be any date because trackable dates can be adjusted, visiting dates, so it could be any dates before, but most likely it will be around the puzzle date if they said visited the cache, for example. You can also track the trackable page itself, and it may simply be on the trackable page itself. Again, watch out for techniques like white text and stuff like that that might be used on the page to hide information, similar like the cache page. So let's take a look at a puzzle that uses trackable as information. So as I mentioned, the 404 puzzle missing actually had two solves. So the bookmarks that we saw earlier, but it also has a trackable solve that will give the same coordinates. So we see there is no trackables in this cache, but that doesn't mean that there is no trackables that have visited this cache. As a cache owner, you can actually, as part of the reviewer node, you can actually dip your trackables as part of placing the cache. And that means that there is technically no log of it, no log by the owner, but still a visit by the trackable by the owner using the reviewer nodes on publishing. So that means that we have to go to view past trackables. And you see here that I dipped my name tag. Now, for people that solve a lot of my puzzles, I never dip my name tag in my own cache. So this is weird and should be a hint that there is something going on. Why would I do this, right? Now, this becomes, of course, harder to solve over time, right? Because this is my name tag, it gets dipped all the time. So it makes more and more miles. And so the longer you wait with solving it, the more difficult it gets because it will be more and more hidden. However, I mentioned most likely the date of publishing is relevant or the date of hiding is publishing now. So you see here already something. It was hidden on 12/14 December, but it was actually published almost a month later. So that is also kind of like a hint, right? So if you look at the published date and the hidden date, there's quite some gap in between. That was just so that to disguise a little bit, I dipped the cache on the 14 when I placed it, but it only published a month later. So by that point, there was lots of extra information on my trackable. So that means that if somebody would look at the trackable, they wouldn't see the information on the first page. They would actually have to go through the history of the trackable. So we see that itself, there's not a lot of details here. Of course, I could have placed details here in the cache information, but there is not. But then you see a bunch of information of where it has been. And you kind of have to search through the archive till you get to the date. So we're still here in January, and we know we have to get back to December, right? December 14. And when we do that, then we see that on December 14, the date of the placement, I visited the name of the cache and the coordinates of the cache. So that is the second way to solve this puzzle, is using the trackables. And I used here a log to do it. And of course, I used the published date of where it would be, right? Because it would have to be there from the beginning. So yeah, trackables and puzzles. Now, another technique that I've seen used quite a bit, especially with empty caches, is the use of so-called blank space. So by simply putting spaces on a page, you can encode something. Spaces between words, put extra spaces somewhere, spaces between lines, empty lines. There's all kinds of things that you can do with spaces that are not automatically cleaned up by Groundspeak when publishing, so that information is there. As a user or a puzzle solver, you may not necessarily see the spaces right away because they may be at the end of sentences. So after a sentence is finished, there might be some extra spaces there. in between sentences. So it can be very tricky. So it's always worth to see, similar like we did before, to look in the HTML or look at the select all of the text and see if there is anything, if there is redundant spaces in the text, because they may actually give a coordinate. And I will do an example of that using again HTML in this case, but I didn't have to, but where I used spaces to encode a coordinate. So here is the puzzle. It's a 404, which of course is the internet code for not found. And oops, I did it again, because again, there is no puzzle. In this case, there is just an image that points to nothing. So again, no puzzle to be found. We have to start looking for extra information. Now I mentioned I used white space here, but I didn't use it on the cache page itself. So it could have been that I put extra spaces, for example, behind this text. There's ways to do that I could have put spaces here, but if I selected it, it would be made visual. But in this case, what we can do is go to the source, and as I mentioned, either search for user or long description. So I do that here, and what we find is, again, an HTML comment like we did before. HTML comment says, sorry, there is nothing to see here, which is great, right? It's like, oops, nothing to do here. However, if we select this text, we actually see that there is a lot of spaces here. And if we count the spaces, then we see like 3 spaces here, 3 spaces here, etc. So we can count the number of spaces, and it would actually give us a coordinate because there is a number of lines. So basically, white space that is not immediately visible can be used on the cache page to perfectly hide a very good coordinate. So one of my most popular videos related to this mystery caches and how to solve them is to hide information inside images. And of course, a cache page can have quite a few of those. You can have the images on the cache page itself, you can have the gallery, you can do background images, and all of them can hide additional information. So even though you see the image, there might be more information in there. So as I mentioned, if you want to see more information about that, there's a special video of hiding information in the image. I'm going to use a little bit of that in this video. I'm going to use one of the techniques to get more information out. But I also earlier on already showed you that, for example, in the HTML page, you can put extra information in the links of the images. In the background images links, you can put extra information. Of course, the images can be hidden. It can be a very small image, so you may have to look at the HTML and see if there isn't a blank image somewhere on the cache page that you don't see, but that is there, that may contain extra information. So as soon as you see an image on the cache page but no puzzle, it's always good to inspect the image to make sure that it isn't anything special. Make sure to check every image because the cache owner may have placed an image that they've used many times, but make sure it's identical to the previous ones. So for example, some cache owner likes to place image to their local group, but for a cache page they may use another image that looks just like it, but is not the same. So look for anomalies as well there in the image to make sure that it's all the same image and not something special. So let's take a look as well for a puzzle that uses images as a technique. As I mentioned, there's many more techniques to hide images, but I recommend looking for the other videos for that. Just going to use a few here. Okay, so let's look at this one again, because just like the other one, this one also has 2 solves. So earlier I showed you using HTML and the spaces, how this can be solved. But we just talked about images, how they can be useful. Now we see here, of course, an image on the page, and we can look for information inside the image. Note that images in a gallery, so in this page there's also a gallery, there is one picture, you have the option to add additional information as well. So you see that right here we can have a description that says not found on this page. But that could of course be a puzzle or a hint to a puzzle or something else. So it's always worth looking at the gallery to see if there's any images there that may be relevant for the puzzle. So you can also see that on the main page. You see that same information right here. Also, yeah, don't assume anything, right? So if we go to the HTML code like we did before, we see a picture, and we see here a picture. It starts with E9A, so the picture address. But if I go to the background information, I see that it actually has a different name and address. In this case, although the image looks alike, they're actually not the same. So they both look like they're identical. So if I would take this image and I will say copy the address and I put it in a tool like Aperisolve or Photo Forensics and I would analyze it, then takes a second for it to generate, but it basically will look for hidden information. And it pretty much, we have some dashes here, but there's not really anything that shows that there is any hidden text here. However, if we do the same one with the other one, the one that starts with the background image, and we load that one, we can clearly see that there is a text appearing right now in between the 404 and the words. So this is hidden in like a off-white color, so you don't see it right away, but an analyzing tool like this tool will make it visible right away. So that is 9CA 32YZ. So, and if we go to that cache page, and let's do that. So let's type in the address of that 9CA32Y6. And we're going to open that cache page right here. Then we find an archived cache. Cache that was archived. Was at a Bucky's, but it was too popular of a location. But again, we see now an empty cache page. So now the search kind of starts all over again, right? We could look at the HTML page, we can look at everything, because now it is kind of like a cache without a puzzle. This is a traditional and an archived one. But also this one, again, I can see and I can go to the gallery. And here, go to the gallery page, and now we find the same 404 picture with the coordinate that is right there. Notice an archive cache, nobody would look at it, so it's pretty easy to hide coordinates, all that. Nobody would take a look at it and expect to find anything there, but from the reference from one cache page to the other, we could hide coordinates. So here is another technique, and that is by using all those extra links that the geocaching page offers, right? So it says, find other caches hidden by that user. I just showed that I used another one of mine to hide the caches, and using the image you could find that. But there's many ways to refer to another cache. You could say one of my favorite puzzles was, and hide it on that cache page. Waymarking. Of course, a nearby waymark can easily be used to leave an additional comment or a note to say, like, hey, the coordinates are here, here, and here. The same with Google Maps or Bing Maps. All of those allow user defined content, like adding images, adding reviews, adding notes, and all of those can be used for coordinates. If you want to see a sample for that, I have a video about using Google to hide and solve images, pictures, and puzzles. And so I will show there as well how, for example, Google Maps can be used to hide an image on the map. So that's just another way and another place on the cache page to take a look at, because it might hide your puzzle right there. So I referenced quite a few of my videos here. The introduction video that talks about more about HTML and looking at HTML and how to do it. About the base conversions, I use that in this picture. About hiding things in images, so I have a special video about that. About different coordinates, like what 3 words and other coordinate systems, so I have a special video about that. And then a special about using Google image search, map searches, other than that, for images. So I recommend looking at all of those. They all contain useful information. If you haven't watched them, you can learn more about these specific subjects. So that brings me to the end of this video. Please like it, and that way other people can find it as well and also learn more about mystery caches. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe as well. That way you will be notified when a new one comes out. And you can learn more different techniques. I have a couple of interesting subjects already planned for future videos. So yeah, please subscribe. If you want to leave a comment or a note, or you see maybe something where I made a mistake, feel free to leave a comment. Always looking for a review. You can also contact me on the geocaching.com website under waterfan5, or you can email me at geocacher.waterfan5@gmail.com. With that, I hope this will help you solve some mystery caches in the future, and when you see a cache that you can panic a little bit less. Thank you.